Good morning, good evening, good day, everyone. I'm Luda Kopakina with GAI Insights, where we rate AI daily news essential, important, and optional, saving you time in your busy day. Please follow with GAI Insights /.com/articles. All of the articles we're going to talk through today are there, and please comment in the chat with your ratings. I have Tim, Adam, Ankash, and a special guest, Ashish from Microsoft. He has been with us several times before, and we really enjoy his comments. So thank you, Ashish, for joining.
Thank you, Luda, for inviting me back. It's a pleasure to be back here.
Wonderful. So let's go forward, Ankash, and let's introduce the first article.
Sure, thanks, Luda. So the first one that we have for today comes from Cohere, and it talks about mastering citations to build trustworthy AI.
Great. This is Cohere talking about how do you reduce hallucinations and put in the relevant citations. What did you think, Tim?
I thought this was lightweight, I guess I would say. So I'd give it an optional. If you're brand new to the subject, it's okay, but there was just nothing particularly new here or even all that insightful. Just, hey, hallucinations are bad, RAG is good, we do RAG. It was, pretty straightforward marketing piece. Didn't even have a product announcement, just really a lightweight piece. So I would give it a pass.
I see. Adam, any other thoughts other than optional?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. It's Tim's pretty much spot on. Yes, citations are important, and I think they're trying to emphasize that they do citations really well. But I mean, Gemini has citations, Perplexity does citations, ChatGPT does citations, M365 Copilot does citations, Grok on X does citations. So they are important, and it's a pretty obvious point and an unnecessary read.
Yeah. So, but they try to point out why they do citations much better than other people in various ways, but it doesn't really come through with no examples and the like as substantive. Ashish, okay with optional?
Yeah, very similar point of view. Citations are very important to build kind of trust with your audience. But again, there's nothing much in the article which kind of explains how they are doing it in a unique way. Very relevant topic for folks who are doing customer-facing chatbots of sorts, but otherwise totally optional.
Okay. Super triple optional. All right, optional it is. Let's go forward. Ankash, please.
Okay, the next one that we have comes from 11 Labs, and it talks about building an effective voice agent for their own docs.
Yeah, this is a use case. So they turn around, they are the people who've been pushing conversational AI quite a bit, and they decided to use it in their own shop with sounds pretty good results. What did you think about this, Adam?
I gave this article an important rating. So I believe we covered, it was maybe 2-3 weeks ago, about the news that it might have been longer, that they now have this voice agent capability. I actually did one of my AI adventures on the Weekly Learning Lab where I was showcasing how you can build one of these. That's on our YouTube channel. And it's pretty cool technology, and it's nice that they're using it themselves and that they're starting to measure at least the effectiveness of it. Along with being a decent article that has some helpful statistics in it, it also lays out the prompt that they use for their agent, which is really good best practice and guidelines. So I think if you're looking even with other tools at creating agents that are going to perform this sort of customer support function, they have a really great example. It even goes into the prompt. It tells the agent what tools are available to it and how it should use those tools. So you see a bit of sophistication and refinement in their application of the concept of an agent using their own technology, which allows you to basically on any website put a button where someone can click it and have a voice conversation with someone from support. So it's pretty amazing. It's no code. Definitely worth checking out if people missed the news. So I consider this an important read.
Yeah, I was wondering whether we should consider it essential. Ashish, what did you think?
When I started reading it, I was like, this is a phenomenal scenario. Why don't more people do this? Because documentation is a pain to go through, right? If you are working with a new product and you're not familiar with their documentation, their style of writing and stuff like that, then it just takes a while to kind of get used to it. And having a chatbot, especially voice bot, that you can ask stuff and it can respond, can point you to the right articles, is such a time saver. So I would love to kind of see this as an important thing, and more people do this.
Tim, important or essential?
Oh, I'd say important. It's a good use case, and I'm not sure how much weight I'd put on the prompting because we don't know which model it is, and we know prompts have a lot of influence depending upon the model. But the structure of the prompt and the detail they go to, it's a good example. So it's a good use case. I think personally, I'd rather see them output a lot, maybe in text rather than voice. But voice is helpful if you are on the phone and they paid attention to the different modalities, the different mediums in which you communicate. So that's important. So there's a lot of good stuff in here. Yep. I mean, again, one level we've said, since day one, customer support, this is like the most obvious thing you can do. What they've done here is done it with voice automation rather than just via chatbot, which is definitely a big improvement.
Yeah, and they talk about guiding the bot if the request is not quite appropriate for the bot to answer, guiding it into different other channels.
Right.
Also,
so it's a good framework for writing a detailed prompt. We still don't know enough about prompts, and we don't. Yeah, and I believe they have their own model, right? So we don't know what effect this prompt would have on ChatGPT or Claude or any of the others.
Yeah, but given what let me still try, huh? Given what Ashish said, that every organization has documentation, and they don't necessarily need to do the bot in voice, but this is the area that across industries, across applications, and this is so accessible and very well laid out. So I think it's an essential read. Anybody will go with me?
So I'll add a couple of other things. I know the prompts are not portable, right? So between two models, they can vary. But the fact that they've laid out the entire prompt gives anybody who's trying to do similar stuff a good framework, a good kind of blueprint to work with, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is that again, if I look at just my use case, whenever something breaks down, like whether it's a machine or whatever, I actually tend to go to YouTube more so to see what other people have done in this area, and sometimes just that modality of video and voice kind of works well for me rather than reading documentation. So again, I feel just beyond documentation, it's a good use case how to implement voice-based chatbots.
Yeah. Adam, have you said you?
Yeah, I mean, I am a huge fan of 11 Labs. Don't get me wrong. If you want to call this essential, I could support that. And Tim, you can configure the AI agent with everything from Gemini 1.5 Flash to GPT 4.0 to Claude 3.5 Sonnet or specify custom LLM. So it's pretty mature there. I mean, they just integrate with whatever you want to do the inference with, which is nice.
Okay. All right, guys, I'm going to go use my chalk power for essential. Let's proceed.
Okay, the next one that we have comes from Quantum Magazine and talks about, can AI models show us how people learn?
Yeah, that's a well-argued article, but pretty lengthy, and talks about the various experimentations on the linguistic side and trying to give models different languages, some very non-really understandable, and see how it does. What did you think about this, Ashish?
So first of all, this was a fascinating read. I've not spent enough time on this or thinking about this as a thing, right? So the article kind of goes through Noam Chomsky's work in linguistics and his hypothesis that AI models like linguistics don't have anything to learn from AI models because they can just learn anything arbitrary, especially languages, right? You can kind of have net new language and the model is just going to learn all of that. And then what researchers recently did was took that as a premise and wanted to either prove or disapprove this. So they called, so the article is written in a very nice way. It's like almost as a movie script. So they call this experimentation mission impossible language model. And they took obviously English as a baseline, but they modified English in 3 different ways by swapping kind of words around in 3 different ways to give it an arbitrary grammar, and then train the model and then see if LLMs can learn just about anything, right? Even this impossible language which has random grammatics, right? And the result that came out was actually the language model finds it difficult to learn these impossible language, as they call them, versus English-like language, which has kind of prolific grammar. So the point that they're trying to make is there is something to be learned from language model, which is close to how kind of humans learn language, and there might be some similarity, but language models might have their own unique way of doing it. So it's not like the models can just learn about everything, even impossible languages. So that was the kind of conclusion. It was interesting read. I don't know if it makes a lot of sense for AI leaders that they can do a bunch with this article, but otherwise, for that reason, it might be optional, but very interesting read for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
Jim?
it's super optional unless you're a linguist, which, by the way, I am. And Noam Chomsky is a big hero of mine. I don't even believe this article, to tell you the truth. It's a great story, but I don't believe it because there's just a million issues. It's very interesting and a nice area for research. And of course, you can tell, one of the great challenges of academics comes up because they say, well, this paper is great because it leads to so many other obvious papers we can write, which is, what academics is about, right? As opposed to, well, we might actually learn something about language learning. And Chomsky is famous because he was one of the people who, working with anthropologists, conjectured that there are universals. And in fact, as far as we can tell, there are. It's still very difficult to study scientifically because we don't understand brains that well. They're pretty complicated. But they were able to say there are universal things that occur in every human language that we've ever discovered. And they're structural. And therefore, there are probably parts of the brain that are, if not hardwired, pretty close to hardwired to be better at picking up those universal structures so people can learn languages, because it's a very powerful tool. All great. There's still controversy over it, as Noam himself would admit. The question is whether large language models reflect this, and Chomsky has said absolutely not. Whether he's right or not, again, it's going to be hard to say because we don't really understand and monitor these languages at enough detail. There's so many computations going on, it's very difficult to tell. But the reality is there's 2 things that make it really interesting, but probably optional, as I said, except for the super nerds into this area. One is, what they don't note is, well, this is a couple of PhD students doing a couple of experiments, as opposed to the 10 years or so and 30 years of neural network and natural language parsing and development, all focused on actually understanding the languages we speak. So there's been an enormous amount of effort put into understanding, for example, English, beyond just setting up a neural network and saying, hey, here's a crazy language, see if you can figure it out. And yes, you can. Anyway, so there's a lot going on beyond just pointing a neural network at a series of tokens and saying, figure this out.
Yeah.
So that's one big issue. And the other is, of course, we've trained these models on languages we understand. And so it's natural that there is a, what's the right word? The tools, what Henry Thoreau, I think, said, we make our tools and then the tools make us, or we shape our tools and then the tools shape us. So we've been building these things to work with languages. Are we surprised that they work better with the languages we built them for? We probably shouldn't be, because we build them for that. And even if it's subconscious, we're building them to work correctly with the languages we use. So there's a whole lot of issue with the science in it, but it's interesting and there could be something there. But, for the linguists and the people who are really interested, we can read in optional.
Yeah. Fascinating by optional. Adam, okay with optional?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Optional it is. Let's proceed, Ankash, please.
Okay, the next one is about Kimi K1.5 model, which is scaling reinforcement learning with LLMs.
Yeah, reinforcement learning and producing pretty good results. Tim, what did you think?
Well, I thought, as you said, the results are fascinating. I tried to get to the paper and the link didn't work for me, so I couldn't get beyond the little summary here. But the benchmarks are impressive. They're on a par with O1, and this was done using much simpler techniques. So another case of sometimes the simplest approach is the best. So rather than the complicated techniques that are used oftentimes in chain of thought and other reasoning algorithms. So there's generate as many possibilities as you can and then try and choose amongst the possibilities. This has a much simpler mechanism that, as I recall, is not even supervised. They just sort of let it figure itself out, and golly gosh, it kind of does. And it gets really, really good performance in doing so with a pretty straightforward mechanism. So I would say interesting. I could lean towards important maybe, but I couldn't read the underlying paper, as I said, so I don't know how much I believe this. And it is pretty technical and it's brand new. It's basically a product announcement. So for those reasons, I sort of lean on the optional side. But boy, if it turns out to be right, could be a really, as we say, these are the major breakthroughs that are coming all the time in the way that we create and structure these models. And this could be one, but hard to say right now, early days.
Adam, Ashish, what do you guys think?
Much like Tim, I wasn't able to kind of get to the underlying paper. The GitHub summary was pretty short. The meta point is if you just scale reinforcement learning, give it more tokens, then over a period of time it develops reasoning capabilities. So that's kind of the meta for me. It was, again, the link GitHub summary was super light, so it didn't give me enough. I would love to kind of spend time kind of read through their actual paper to get a deeper understanding. I would say at this point of time, optional.
Yeah. Okay, so Adam, I wasn't able to get, the PDF was not working.
Yeah, no, I'm optional with what we're given, even probably if I read more into it, that we are seeing new approaches and we are seeing these innovations of reinforcement learning. And this is at least the second, if not the third model in a week that we've seen announce O1 performance. So, there is no moat with this stuff is probably the takeaway, which we already know. And it seemed optional to me as just yet another in what's becoming a very crowded space.
Yeah, it's getting to be. Yeah, even with reinforcement learning, we've seen one model focused on reinforcement learning. So this is
that just yesterday, I think. Yeah,
yesterday was right. Okay, yeah. So okay, let's mark it as optional. Let's proceed.
So one thing that Adam said is super interesting. I was there was a video yesterday. I follow David Shapiro on YouTube. He kind of talks about large language models. He also mentioned the same exact code that Adam used, which is there is no moat, especially with the reasoning model. I think the way O1 and OpenAI started at it, people will take different other approaches to kind of get to reasoning as well, and it doesn't have to be the exact same way. And that's what we're kind of seeing fall out right now. But again, this is a few years ago, actually, a Google researcher kind of wrote a paper saying we don't have a moat around AI and everything because open source will just replicate everything. So I think we're seeing the same kind of sentiment play out.
And here we are.
Yeah, we are.
Absolutely. We've been saying that for a long time that, if you're gonna, I guess, how did John say it? He said something to the effect of, if you're going to invest is the way I would put it, invest in Meta, maybe not in OpenAI.
Yeah.
Not to say anything about Microsoft. Microsoft seems to be doing fine with their relationship with OpenAI, but OpenAI has to spend a lot of money, and there just isn't a moat as far as we can tell.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's mark it as optional and proceed to the next one. Ankaj.
Okay, the next one that we have is around AI and sustainability, talking about the power of integration.
Yeah. So this is obviously the AI sustainability are already quite linked. Maybe not in specific metrics. That's one can point to, but and it's not quite in every company that this is being measured. So this is an article saying should be done. And what did you think about this, Ashish?
Yeah, it was an interesting article, and just the topic of AI and sustainability, looking at where they stand today, they seem to be at odds with each other, because again, the more you consume AI, the more carbon footprint probably you have. Um, the article had a lot of kind of opinion, so I didn't learn a ton from the article in terms of how people can manage this. There are a few good nuggets of information, like you don't have to, or about 90% of the use cases that use Gen AI don't need the most powerful model. And you can always go to a smaller model, which will have a smaller footprint and things like that. So those kind of nuggets were interesting. Other than that, I didn't had a ton of takeaway from the article. It was a lot of opinion.
Optional in your book. Okay.
Yes.
Tim, Adam, optional?
Yeah, the only reason I could even lean modestly toward important is just what we used to call in the old days consciousness raising.
Yeah.
Just, you ought to think about this maybe a little bit. Everybody's so excited to adopt AI, and because again, this is part of the problem with our current market structure, not to wax too philosophical, is we don't take externalities into account. So the cost of energy, in theory, is there, and the true economists who say, well, you have to pay X dollars per month, and they have to pay for the energy, so it's in there. But the cost to the climate is definitely not in there in any major way. So all these sort of indirect things are not there. So, I might say it's a short read. It's not super insightful, but it's something to consider. And it might even save you some money. As she said, you don't need 03 or 01 mini for every problem, right? You can use the much smaller models to get a lot of stuff done. And not only might it be better for sustainability, but it also probably be better for your pocketbook.
Yeah, I didn't like this article. I really thought this was very superficial. It's a good message, but they didn't offer much. And until you start measuring the impact on sustainability really and put it as a metric for CTOs or whoever, or chief AI officers, you're not going to get this, because they are really somewhat at odds you need to experiment, and as you experiment, you use more energy. So it's maybe, I don't know,
Well,
and saying you should do it doesn't really
Here's
help.
the argument on the other side, because I'm usually the one who's saying optional for everything. Here's the argument on the other side. 30 years ago, we went to a small power company. 30 years ago, over 30 years ago, gosh, maybe it's 30 years. Anyway, that general time frame, and said, people are going to want to buy green energy. And so you should start really tracking, because this company happened to generate a lot of hydroelectric energy. It had a greener footprint than a lot of energy companies. And, you should start selling this, and you could sell it for a premium. And everybody thought we were nuts, absolutely nuts. And we said, this climate change stuff is real. Even 30 years ago, if you were paying attention, everybody knew it. And more importantly, there was enough excess income that people were going to start paying attention to this stuff. So there is an argument that says, hey, it's going to be first to those companies that are directly impacted by power. a lot, right? Manufacturing companies and others use a lot of power and want to use a lot of AI, they'll be impacted. But, you know, if you can put together communications, I think that was one of the suggestions, you know, use the AI to, you know, write mediocre at best, but better than nothing communications about your sustainability. I think people underestimate how much of an impact that can have on their consumer base. So again, depends what your consumer base is, but for a lot of people, it could be interesting. So there's some nuggets in here, and the general idea of thinking a little more about sustainability isn't a bad idea. So I can go optional, because you're right, it's not the greatest article, but I think the topic is more important than people give it credit for.
Yeah. So let me get the votes from Ashish and Adam quickly. Ashish?
Let me kind of rethink. Tim has swayed me a little bit. So there are a couple of things, right? There are 3 dimensions of AI, like the compute cost, data, and power. Power, everybody's kind of almost unanimous that you might hit that wall more than anything else, right? And there are techniques. So if Ankaj, if you can scroll the article, there is point number 3, which says don't hit brakes on AI, but integrate using sustainable behavior from the very start. I feel if you need to kind of get the TLDR, that is one kind of block of writing where you can get a bunch of things, like you don't need the most powerful model, use prompt caching, and other things like that has the TLDR for everything.
Yeah.
So I would, again, as you said, Luda, wasn't very well written. I didn't take a lot away from it, but there are nuggets of good information which probably might be obvious, but I'm not sure everybody's thinking about it. The options.
Yeah, Adam?
So I feel like sustainability is in a similar camp in my mind to alignment and ASI and what we're doing about this race to, you know, superior intelligence, in that the behavior is going to change when the incentives are aligned with the behavior we want from people. And at the moment they aren't. If Ankaj, if you can scroll back up to the second point, I agree with Ashish. The third point is a good one, and for that reason alone, it might be worthwhile to call this important. Certainly because it is about sustainability, and that is important. I would push back a little bit in that, yeah, they don't always need the most powerful model, but the incentive in cost alone will get them to start using cheaper models for the tasks that don't need O1 or something like that. So that's already there, but what's missing is the incentive here around decarbonizing your cloud. And the first line there, it says the analysis shows up to 70% of a typical company's IT Scope 3 decarbonization goals depend on decarbonization of its suppliers. So there's this perception that I think we want to perpetuate in terms of brand amplification, that the people who are showing that they're decarbonizing and that they're taking sustainability into their models are going to get the business. And the more we can demonstrate that as a business or with our suppliers and tell them that we want them to be doing that, the more that the financial incentive aligns with the behavior of actually decarbonizing. So there are some decent points in here. I'm with you, Luda. I think there are probably much better articles on this exact point right now, but for those reasons, I think it's worth putting as important.
All right. Let's put it as important. It's a good message, even though light in its delivery. Okay, important it is. Let's proceed. The last one. We only have half a minute left, so but it's an important topic. Let's.
Plenty of time.
This one, yes. Adam. Oh, I'm sorry, Ankash, please introduce.
Sure. The last one that we have for today talks about how Microsoft is relaxing data center grip on OpenAI amid the Stargate $500 billion joint venture.
Yep. Adam, what did you think?
Announced at the White House, Stargate, $500 billion investment over 4 years, $100 billion immediately to start data center construction in Texas. It's pretty big news. The news here is that Microsoft had the agreement that they had the exclusive right to build additional infrastructure to support OpenAI, and they've relaxed that, but consequently are also part of this agreement, along with NVIDIA, ARM, Oracle, SoftBank, This is a massive venture, and it's going to be a huge injection of compute effectively into the U.S. infrastructure in the race for AGI. So I would consider it as essential or possibly an important read. Essential perhaps because it's such a big number and it came out of the White House, and I expect our AI leaders are going to be expected to have known about this.
Okay, so important / essential. Tim, we have less than a couple of seconds.
I would agree, although I would say, and I'm going to have trouble not being a little political. Trump had nothing to do with this. This was all done. I mean, this was announced the first day of his office. This has been going on for a long while at this scale. And look at the amount of infrastructure deals that have been done in the past couple of years. So this is not surprising at one level. It's important because it involves big players and big infrastructure. But the whole thing with Grok and building the huge compute center with Elon Musk, the big one in in Saudi Arabia. They're just all over the place. They're going to build these big data centers.
Yeah.
And so the interesting news here is more about OpenAI looks like trying to get a little more ability to control their own destiny on the compute side.
Yeah, it's a massive announcement with a lot of focus on AI. Forget about political thing that is happening with immediate data center construction in Texas. So for AI industry, I think it is essential news from my perspective.
Yep.
What did you think about this, Ashish?
I always say compute is the new oil. So again, this is in line with that. I would say this is also a first of many. We'll see other companies kind of follow the suit, and there are going to be bigger data centers built because the compute need is just huge for the future. So essential read.
Okay, essential it is. Let's bring the scorecard, Ankash. We're running a little bit out of time here. We have 2 essentials, 1 important, and 3 optional, I believe. Correct?
Correct, Luda. Coming right up.
Okay. Yes, great. Thank you, everybody, for listening. No comments today, so please comment tomorrow. Ashish, thanks for joining. Thanks, analysts, for pitching in. Great discussion. Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.